Hello everybody, we are here on Way of the Hunter once again today with a guide on what you guys should be doing when you first get access to this game, and there is quite a bit to go through, so we're going to try and not waste too much time on each of these topics because I do have a lot of topics to go through in this video, probably around 13 or 14 different tips or I guess little mini guides within a guide. So I think one of the first things that you guys will want to do when you get access to this game is you're going to want to complete the first 3 or 4 missions. Because when you first get the game and you first start your missions, if you don't finish the first 3 or 4 of them, you will not get access to any of the gear in the shop except for the Remington 783 rifle, because that one is unlocked from the beginning. But in order to get the rest, you will have to do the missions up until the point where it says that you have unlocked the store. And that is when you will get access to all of the weapons in the game, as well as the collars, binoculars, the attachments, and the boundaries passes. And we will talk about these passes a little bit later in the video, as they actually are very, very cool, and I love the way that they've done them, but we need a little bit more detail on them, so we will push that back till later in the video. Now, I've had a lot of people ask me what gear they should prioritize when they first start playing the game, and what gear will help them kind of progress through the game a little bit faster and more, I guess, easily. And some of the stuff that you are going to want to take note of is that early game rifles, there is actually a decent amount of options that aren't too expensive, and I think the first purchase you should make should be the Scarecrow Hunter 2, as it is 7mm Mod 8 Remington, and that's a very good deer round, and early on deer are going to be your primary target until you are able to afford something like the 300 Magnum, which is also a pretty good early game gun, as it gives you the ability to take down moose pretty effectively, and moose are one of the highest paying animals in the entire game. And then as far as the shotguns go, I would definitely recommend buying the 20 gauge semi-automatic as your first shotgun, as it is only 100 credits more than the Bonzer and Klein standard. And this one is semi-automatic with a 4 shell mag capacity versus the 2 shell capacity of the 16 gauge. So I definitely recommend starting with the 20 gauge if you're looking for a shotgun to take down the pheasants or some of the waterfowl species. Then as we move over to the gear tab, I wouldn't really worry about collars early on, as it does take a while to make most of the collars useful, and I haven't had too much use of the collars so far. They don't seem to attract them super often, at least from my experience, so I would definitely recommend in the gear tab to go for the 10x binoculars as your first purchase from this little tab of the store right here. It's definitely a good investment to get a little bit of extra zoom on your binoculars, though I would definitely prioritize weapons and scopes before the binoculars, but if you're looking for some better ones, I would definitely recommend picking them up because they do give you a little bit of extra zoom. And also that increase in lens quality is very nice as well because there's less blur when you're looking down range, especially at longer distances, which is also pretty nice. And then as far as the attachments go, for the shotgun, you will want to use the Red Dot Zoom XD if you don't like the iron sights. I found this one to be pretty good, and to be honest, I don't like the carbine optic from Leupold because, though it is the same lens quality, it's got a bit of a blue tint on it, which can really make it difficult to see the birds as they're flying away. I have found this one to be much easier to use with shotguns if you're bird hunting, so definitely recommend that. And as far as scopes go, for the early game, I definitely recommend getting the 14x right here, the 4.5 to 14x Leupold VX3 HD. This scope is very affordable, and it goes way further in magnification than the starting scope does. And then as far as the late game gear goes, stuff that you're going to want to work towards to possibly use for some of your later hunts and for the rest of the game, I would definitely recommend the 308 Steyr monoblock, as this is probably the best deer rifle in the entire game. It kills them super quickly, and it's very, very reliable. You can do some pretty long-range shots with it as well, and I've been having an absolute blast with this thing, though it is quite expensive at a total of 6,700 credits, which is why I don't have it as a goal for early game gear. Once you've built up some money, though, this is a great option to go with. And then if you really want something that can just punch out to super long ranges and take things down quickly, you could go with the 338 as well, though I have noticed that if you take even a moose, which is one of the biggest animals in the game, at close range, you don't get a full hunt rating, and hunt rating will determine the amount of money you get. So unless you're doing long range, you don't really need the 338, though it is a very cool rifle to use, and if you just want something that drops them down quickly and you don't mind losing a little bit of cash, then it can be a pretty fun rifle to go with. And as for some of the scopes to kind of work towards as you get progressed further into the game, of course the 18x is probably the best scope in all of Way of the Hunter, though I have really enjoyed using the 3 to 15x as well because it's got a very nice reticle. It doesn't zoom quite as far, but I think the reticle makes up for that. The next thing that we will kind of talk about a little bit is the Hunter Sense, and on PC you can activate the Hunter Sense by clicking Q. I actually don't know what it is going to be on console, however it will be available in your key bindings, and you can access the key bindings by going to Game, and then going to Controller. This will show you all of the controller controls, which is nice. It's good that they have included this so you can at least see what keys you're going to need to use in order to do each individual action, and it does seem that if you want to use the Hunter Sense, it is actually the Y button on Xbox, though they don't actually show a PlayStation controller here, but I would assume that it's probably going to be the triangle. Now, one of the first things that the Hunter Sense can do is not only highlight tracks and blood that's in the area, but it also can highlight the need zones, and we'll kind of show that once I find a need zone. But let's talk about one other thing that it can do first, and that is actually give you an idea of where the bullet is going to hit based off of the distance to your target and what you're zeroed to. Now, the zeroing is actually pretty nice in this game as you have a lot of different increments. On PC, it is the up arrow, so I'm going to assume that it's probably going to be something similar on controller, but we show the controller scheme so you guys can go off of that. But you can zero, and depending on what your zeroing is, that will depict where the dot is going to be on where your shot could land. And as you can see, that red dot kind of moves as I change the zeroing, and it will also change based on the wind direction. Whenever you hold your breath to take the shot, it will kind of tighten it up a little bit and give you a good idea of the possible range and, I guess, radius that the bullet could impact, which is very nice. It's very helpful for long-range shots especially. Another thing that you will notice with the Hunter Sense is if you are within around 250 meters, you will get spotting information on the animal that you're looking at through the binoculars, provided you have Hunter Sense enabled. The second I turn it off, it goes away, so that is something to remember if you'd like to actually see what the rating of the animal is as well as their age. It can be very helpful in determining what deer and just in general animals that you want to take down to better your populations, and we will get into the genetic system and aging system in a little bit, but first we have a couple more things to talk about with the Hunter Sense, and that would be what the need zones look like and stuff like that. When you are walking around in the world with your Hunter Sense, and when you first actually start the game, you won't be able to walk while using Hunter Sense, as this is a perk that you will have to unlock later. However, whenever you're in the Hunter Sense, you will see that there is some spots on the ground that kind of flash and glow, and these are the need zones. And you can go up to them and press the action button, which on PC it is E, and it will allow you to analyze it and give you some information about the species that uses this zone, as well as the frequency of use, and frequency of use will determine how often you actually see them at this zone during their specific need zone time. With this one being an eating zone and frequency of use being rarely, you will on rare occasions see the mule deer here. Every single group of animals in the game, like every single herd, has a few different zones of the same type that they can go to, and as for which one that they will go to on each day will determine on the frequency of use. The Hunter Sense is also how you will see the call icons from animals and get an idea of whether or not they are giving you a warning call or if it's just a normal call and they're still calm. And that can be very helpful if you want to try and figure out if something's about to spook. It will tell you in the call information at the second to last information line there. Now let's give an example of how to use the dot when you're about to take down a deer, as we got the perfect opportunity on one of these guys right here. So we're currently zeroed for 200, which is a little bit further than they are, so let's zero to 150. You'll see that the dot is right where our reticle is, and this will kind of tell us that we're zeroed properly and the bullet's going to land right where the crosshair is. However, whenever you're using the Hunter Sense, I recommend just aiming wherever the dot is showing, and in this case, it's right in the center. So it looks like this guy is going to give us the perfect shot, and in most cases, you do want to shoot right behind the shoulder while the animal is broadside, as that will give you the highest chance of it being a vital hit and making sure that you can take it down. You could go for heart, but it's a little bit more risky than going for a double lung shot. Another cool feature is, as long as you don't let go of the button after firing, your character will not chamber another round, so you could even exit the aim mode, do whatever you want, and it won't chamber another round until you release the fire button, and then it will chamber the next round, which is very cool. I absolutely love that that is a possibility. It really makes it so you can pay close attention to where your bullet is landing, because you don't have to worry about the scope kind of going black from chambering another round, which is really good. Another very helpful feature whenever you take down a buck is to place a marker right where you shot it. We didn't do it here because I forgot, but what you can do is on PC you can press X, and on consoles you can press, well, on Xbox it would be the right bumper, and the equivalent on PlayStation. But it can be very helpful for remembering where you shot the animal, as it can be difficult to locate the blood sometimes if you're not 100% certain of where you took the animal down. This is going to be one of those situations where we will go into the hunter's sense to try and figure out where we ended up shooting this guy. And right here is the blood, and it will flash just like any other track. Though if you didn't hit it well, it'll definitely be harder to see than what we can see right now. But you're just going to want to follow the direction. The direction that it's aiming will be whichever end has, I guess, a thinner amount of blood. As you can see right here, that kind of points in the direction the next blood track should be. Obviously, they don't leave blood trails in water, so that can be a little bit unfortunate at times whenever you kill one in the water. Another really cool feature with the blood is that it can actually be left on the leaves and also the rocks, so if you end up having a buck run through one of the bushes, it will actually brush blood off onto the bush, which is really cool. One of the coolest features that we've seen in Way of the Hunter, in my opinion. It's just a nice little attention to detail type of thing that really immerses you. But once you have followed the blood trail, it should lead you to wherever your animal is, provided you made a good enough shot to take it down. And as long as you have at least medium bleed rate, then it was a vital hit that will eventually kill it. And for some reason, it is showing... Oh my gosh, that is incredible. So this actually is pretty cool right here. I was confused for a second, but this brings me to something else that this game offers that is good to take note of. If you shoot an animal and it doesn't end up dying from your shot, it will continue to grow. And eventually, if you find it again, it will show you what it looked like when you took the first shot, and it will also give you all of the information from that shot, which is incredible. So as we see here, I made a very poor shot with the 338 at one point and missed everything, just only hit flesh, nicked the spine a tiny bit, but not enough to kill it. And then we take a look at shot number 2, which is the one that we just took, and he is much bigger. He survived that first hit and lived on to become a giant. So it's honestly a good thing that we didn't kill him when I took that first shot a while back. Because now this guy is, well, for some reason it shows 1 star. I guess it shows the information when you first shot it, but it's a little unfortunate that it shows the old stats from my first hit on him, as I would like to kind of know what the stats of him are now. I didn't get a chance to see what level he was, so that's a little bit sad. This guy ended up scoring 385 though, so this would be a 3 star, so that's good to know at least. Unfortunate that it had to kind of bug out from that first shot. Of course, when I decided to record a guide. But we can still explain the harvest screen here because there's a lot of information to go through that may be kind of confusing if you haven't read through the Encyclopedia or kind of read through the tutorials and stuff. The biggest thing that I've seen that has caused a lot of confusion for people is this DNA symbol right here, and this is the genetics of the animal. It's not a percentage of how long the animal has lived through its life, and it's not a percentage of how close it is to dying, with 100% being when it dies. That's not what this is. What this is the genetic potential of the animal. The lower it is, the less chances this deer has of being something big when it finally matures fully and eventually ends up dying. Now, today we actually ended up killing a 99% genetics buck, and I've also seen not only a 4-star 99% genetics, but also a 1-star 99% genetics. So basically what you would like to do in this game, if you're trying to get the most out of your herds, what you want to prioritize is getting rid of bad genetics animals, and you might be curious how you can determine that. A lot of times, the best way to determine a bad genetics animal is, for example, a mature whitetail that has a 1-star trophy rating, because it's already into the final stages of its life and it hasn't gone past 1 star. This also goes for 2 stars. There's no way they could possibly have good genetics if they're only a 2-star at the age of mature. So it's something to take into account when you're hunting, trying to prioritize only the bad genetics animals at first in hopes that eventually your reserve will grow some monsters. I try to keep any good genetics animals alive early on and then only take out those bad genetics one. And an example of a good genetics animal would be like a 2-star young buck, or if you manage to find one, even a 3-star adult buck. Because both of those would be considerably larger than what the average for that age range would be. And other than that, the only other thing that we really need to explain here is the trophy rating versus the hunt rating. Now, the trophy rating is going to be based off of the animal's score, which will be in the trophy tab. There are specific score ranges clear up to 500, with different tiers that will be explained in the Encyclopedia as well. But basically, that's how it's deciding what the star rating will be, is based on the actual score of the animal's rack. And obviously, if the animal does not have antlers, it will be scored a little bit differently. And if I can find something, we'll end up looking over those as well. But I guess the best example I can give is a 5-star trophy has to score between 460 and 500. And once it passes 460 in score, that's when its trophy rating ends up changing to a 5-star versus a 4-star being, I believe, between 420 and 460. I might be wrong on there, but it's around that range. And that will determine what ends up showing as the trophy rating. Now, the hunt rating is based off of using the proper caliber, shooting it, I guess, an ethical amount of times, shooting it in ethical places. For example, you can't do a headshot or else it's going to completely disqualify the trophy as you've ruined the mount. And the same goes for running an animal over with a vehicle. You won't get any hunt rating or trophy rating for doing that because it's not an ethical way to hunt them. And right in the middle is the difficulty, which there is 4 difficulties in the game. Adventurer being the second difficulty, and it's basically the default. But there is other difficulties as well. There's Explorer, Adventurer, and then a couple others after that. I believe the final one is called Hunter. And it's actually pretty incredible, just some of the stuff that differs from each of the difficulty. The main ones being how easily animals spook. Each difficulty will increase the awareness of the animals, and they'll be much harder to get close to. And considering in Adventure it's already difficult to get within 200 meters of an animal unless you're slow crouching, I can imagine on some of the higher difficulties, it's going to be virtually impossible to get super close. And on the highest difficulty of all, you cannot use the hunter sense as well, which makes it even more difficult. Now we'll go back to the shot information here, as this is the first screen that you're greeted with whenever you take an animal down and claim it. This will give you a breakdown of where the shot ended up impacting and all the organs it hit. When you see this red damage, that is cavity damage, which is basically because of the energy that the bullet is creating as it's going through the animal. And we can see that some of this damage is grayed out. That damage is actually from the previous shots, so it gives you an idea of what your previous shot did if you had shot it more than once. And then the kind of bronzy coloration is the penetration damage from the round itself, and not necessarily the shock damage, just the damage that the actual bullet did when it went through the animal. You will also see that there is kind of like a bronzy gold little range right here with various numbers next to it. That is the hit energy and also the recommended energy. So for a mule deer, for example, you're recommended to be using just barely under 4,000 energy for like the round that you're using. And this line right here is the hit energy that it had when impacting. So you can see that recommended energy is within this range, and our hit had 3,396. So the farther that it goes into the animal, the more energy it loses until it completely stops. And this can be affected greatly by what you end up impacting. Bones will obviously slow it down more so it has less penetration and loses energy quicker, but that can also make it expand more, creating more cavity damage, which is really cool. Then once you have looked through the kill screen, you can determine whether or not you want to tax it or sell it. If you sell it, you instantly get the coins. If you tax it, you don't lose any money until you actually place it in the lodge, and we will go over the lodge a little bit later. But this one right here we will sell, since I really have no idea what the rating truly is, and yeah, it's something all kinds of buggy with this one, but you know, it is what it is. At least we kind of got a look at the different colorations for like previous hits and current hits and stuff like that. There actually is some more deer in front of us, and that is a 3-star mature buck. You know, this will give us another opportunity to kind of talk about something else, and, well, that is the genetic system and aging and respawns. We did kind of talk about the genetics already, but, for example, this buck right here is getting very old, and it is a 3-star, but I don't think it's going to get any bigger than that, so we'd probably want to just take it down. And after we take it down, we're going to drop a marker right there so that we know exactly where we ended up shooting it. But the thing that I really wanted to talk about is what to do if you end up taking a really good genetics animal. What I like to try and do is anytime I take down a 4-star or a 5-star, considering they usually would have very good genetics, I like to take down a couple bad genetics animals to kind of counteract what I just did with one of the good genetics animals. So that is by far, at least as of now, with this being only in early access for like 2 weeks for content creators and being a day before full release, as of now, that seems to be one of the best ways to counteract the consequences of shooting the high genetics animals, because obviously if you shoot all the high genetics animals, your herds would have just poor genetics overall because that's all that would be left. And so whenever you take a good genetics animal, it is good to take down a couple bad genetics one as well. And we explained how to determine whether or not it's good or bad genetics earlier, but it's something else that I didn't really detail as well as I probably should have that we're going to talk about now is you can determine how old an animal is based off of the fur color, the fur textures with the amount of patchiness and scarring that it has, as well as the antler coloration and the amount of wear on the antlers. And we're going to take a look at a few different mature mule deer very shortly to show you guys what the differences are like. But this guy right here ends up being a 386, so it scored a little higher than the last one. And you can see right here it's a 3-star trophy rating with 82% genetics. So, you know, these are decent genetics, but not really high enough for it to have a high chance of becoming a 5-star. And this buck did seem pretty old, so it is one that's pretty good to get out of your herds. And like I said, always kill a couple bad genetics animals after, like a couple 1-star matures if you can find them, to kind of counteract the high genetics animal that you just killed. This video is actually going way longer than I had actually intended it to, so I think we're going to try and speed through the remainder of the different topics we were going to cover. I think we'll start with showing off some of the differences between mule deer that I've taken down and how I'm starting to be able to tell which ones I need to take. Now, these were both in the mid to high 80s percentile when it comes to the genetics. And one thing that you will notice about these mule deer, and we will actually go into the photo mode real quickly so that we can change the lighting and get a little bit of a clearer look at them, I guess. But one of the big things that you will notice between a high genetics buck that is a 4-star versus a low genetics buck that's a 4-star, both of these bucks right here were 86 and 87% genetics. And one thing that you'll notice is, though the fur doesn't look too different on these ones, there can be some patchiness to the fur as they get older, and that can be a way to tell if it's about to die. But one of the biggest things that I noticed is the coloration of the antlers. You will see that on an old buck like this that has lower genetics, meaning it's closer to dying being a 4-star than a high genetics buck would be as a 4-star. But this guy's got a lot of fading, there's a lot of discoloration from sun exposure, there's a lot more wear on the tips of the antlers. And that can be one way that you can see if it's an old one, because right here is a 99% genetics buck, and you can see it's got a lot more darker tones throughout the antlers and a little bit less wear on the tines. And the biggest factor in that, I was told that sun exposure is the main cause of the lightening of the antlers, and obviously, if this buck is a little bit younger than the others, but still the same size, he's going to have less discoloration. But considering his genetics were higher, he's got a higher max potential of what he could potentially be towards the end of his lifespan. So even though these mule deer do look very similar and score similar, these two are much older than this guy is because his genetics just in general are better, so he's going to have a higher score that he could potentially reach. And unfortunately, we took him before he reached his prime. These two, however, were probably at the very end of their life and would not have gone to a 5-star because the genetics were a little bit lower. And I imagine that if this guy had aged to a 5-star, his antlers would have faded to the point that those are as well. And hopefully this isn't too convoluted to understand, as I am kind of trying to explain this on the fly, and it's still very early in this game's existence, so we don't fully know everything about it, but this is some of the stuff that I've noticed that has really helped me determine what animals to take down. And I think when it comes to the fur, it's most noticeable on these whitetail that I've killed. This guy right here was a 5-star buck with very high genetics. I believe it was around 98%, and you could tell that his fur does not have as much patchiness to it and is not nearly as worn down, and even the tines aren't as worn down as some of the ones I've seen, though these are kind of faded still. But then you take a look at a buck like this, who is definitely much older looking. His fur is much more patchy and kind of rugged and beat up. But this guy was only a 4-star, and that's because his genetics were lower than what this 5-star was. So this guy doesn't look quite as old, but he's larger because this guy had much better genetics. And this one right here is a 3-star that was also a mature that had even lower genetics. So this was about the max potential this guy was going to reach. He could have got a little bit bigger as these antlers aren't quite as faded, meaning that he probably did have a little bit of growing left to do, but not much. However, the fur was very patchy on this guy as well, so he was still definitely nearing his max potential. And I hope this has given you guys an idea of the differences when it comes to how animals look as they get older, and how to determine what a good genetics animal is going to look like, because this can be very difficult to explain, especially this early on when we still don't know everything. I think the very last thing that we will briefly touch on with the genetics of animals is I've noticed that bad genetics animals tend to be way more wonky and uneven, and the good genetics animals look much more even on each side of their antlers. This guy right here was a very bad genetics 2-star whitetail that was a mature in age, and you can see that he is incredibly wonky and uneven. And I've only seen this with the bad genetics animals, so I assume that it is something that is tied to how good their genetics are. This guy looks incredibly wonky and just uneven all around, and I haven't seen that on any of the good genetics animals. But next we're going to talk about the trophy lodges, as there's a lot to cover with these as well. So you may see that there is a ton of different types of mounts, and each of these has specific species that can go here, but each one is not bound to just one animal. You can see that there's a lot of different variety. You can do whitetail, moose, mule deer, elk, and each of them has different poses they can be in as well, which is cool. It's really good that we get lots of variety with these mounts, and also you don't actually pay for the taxidermy until you are about to place the animal down. So we have a duck right here. If I select the diorama, you will see that it says 190 coins. This is how you end up mounting them, and this is when you actually do pay to get them put up. So it's a little bit different than what we're used to in Call of the Wild, and obviously the bigger the mount, the more expensive it's going to be. So let's take a look right there. It was 1,600 for a whitetail deer. Let's see what it would be for an elk. So 3,600 for an elk. So it's definitely quite varying depending on what the species is and the size of the platform. And you can also take the animals down whenever you want, but you will have to pay the fee to mount them once again if you put them somewhere else in the lodge. Now, there's not a lot left to go over. I think we'll just briefly cover a couple things that can be pretty quickly talked about. The best money in the game is easily moose. You can get over 1,000 credits for each moose kill, which is why the 300 Magnum is one of the first guns I recommend getting. When it comes to where animals are located, it's actually very easy to figure that out by going to the Encyclopedia, going to animals, clicking on the animal of your choice. Now, you do need to get these entries into your encyclopedia by collecting one need zone from the animal, but it shows you the locations where you can find them. The grassland, lowland, forest is the primary location you will find mule deer, and the way you know where that is by going to the map, and whenever you see the name of a place, it tells you what it is below. So for example, Small Paws is a lowland forest, so you will end up finding mule deer there. And speaking of the encyclopedia, this is going to be your best friend in the game. It tells you a lot of information, including how to determine what is an old animal, what is a good genetics one and a bad genetics one, just like I explained. But if you're still a little bit confused about it, you can look in here and it'll give you lots of information as well. And that goes for basically everything. You can look at so many different things in the encyclopedia. It's kind of crazy just how much info is packed into this thing. And as far as the perk system goes, you can see the requirements for every single perk in your character tab, and then clicking perks right here, you can see that it tells you what you need to do in order to achieve it, and then after that it's just a matter of actually completing those achievements. The taxidermy assistant gives you a look at everything you have taxidermized. You are only able to hold 75 at first, but to be honest, that's not that big of a deal in this game, as you really don't tax a lot of stuff because it's very difficult to get big animals in this game. So I feel like 75 is perfectly fine. However, there is also a perk that you can get that will increase the amount of space for animal trophies to around 100, which is nice. You can also check your hunting log to see everything you have ever shot, and it tells you the exact number of animals you've killed as well, which is another cool feature. Love to see it. Something cool with the taxidermy assistant as well is you can review the bullet cam for a second time. If you want to go to something that you've killed in the past and just take a look at its stats. It's really cool that they allow you to do this, and you can even look at like the genetics of an animal. For example, if you shot something early on and you wanted to see like, did I make a mistake? You can always come back here and see what the genetics of those animals were. The last thing that we will talk about is the private land in the game, because it's a very awesome feature. You'll see that this location shows that it is locked, and nothing else on the map shows that it's locked. So I have unlocked 3 of the private locations, and there's 2 ways you can do that. The best way to do it, in my opinion, is to complete the jobs provided by the cabin owner. You will go to these outposts, and there will be a note on the table. You can pick up that note, you'll get an objective, and once you've completed 3 to 4 missions, it will give you access to this location, and you'll be able to hunt there. And the cool thing about the private land is early on, it will have the best genetics animals on the entire reserve, because of the fact that it is private property, and Usually in real life even, private property is going to house some of the best animals because they don't have pressure from hunters and they have longer to end up growing big. And that is where I have taken some of the best trophies that we have found in this game. I took a 5-star elk from down here, and we ended up watching it grow from a 4 to a 5-star. And then I've also taken a 5-star whitetail down in the diamond drill, so this is definitely worth going towards. It's definitely worth trying to get these private area passes because you can get some big trophies early on. And another thing that we should talk about before I forget about it is the campsites. So campsites are something that you can find throughout the map, and these question marks can be campsites, they can be hunting stands, or just random landmarks. So it's good to check all these question marks in case there is a campsite there, because that will allow you to fast travel to them. And believe me, you're going to want them because this map is massive, and with only 5 outposts, it can be pretty tiresome to drive around to all the locations you'd like to hunt. And I think that's pretty much all we had to go through, though this went way longer than I would have wanted to, and I didn't end up explaining some of the stuff as well as I would have liked. But this is kind of a last-minute guide, as it is like 12, maybe a little bit more hours before the game fully releases to everybody, and I still got to get everything edited and put together, so I hope this little day 1 guide at least helped you guys with some things, though it wasn't as easy to understand as I would have preferred. At some point, we might do a more detailed guide on specific things, but for now, this is what we've got, and I hope it helped you guys. With that being said, thank you all for watching. If you are brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe, click that like button, and ring that notification bell so that you guys will never miss any of the future uploads. Also, be sure to leave a comment down below on what you guys would like more information on in future videos, and also what helped you out the most throughout this entire guide. With that being said, thank you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Peace!